I don't understand how someone like you ended up in this neighborhood.
A place doesn't decide a person's worth.
Their actions do. People like him don't just appear in neighborhoods like this.
Soon, they will know who I really am.
For months, the entire neighborhood watched a wealthy woman mock the quiet new man who had moved into the old house at the end of the street. She treated him like he didn't belong there. She judged his clothes, his car, and the color of his skin. To her, he was just another poor outsider who had somehow wandered into the wrong community. What she didn't know was that every cruel glance, every act of humiliation, and every complaint she made was bringing her closer to a truth that would leave the entire neighborhood stunned. Because the man she looked down on wasn't who she thought he was at all. And when his real identity was finally revealed, the people who had ignored the bullying were forced to confront a question they never saw coming. How well do we really know the people we choose to judge? The neighborhood was known for its spotless lawns, luxury homes, and residents who took pride in keeping outsiders away. People there liked things a certain way. Everyone knew everyone, and anyone new immediately became the subject of attention. That attention quickly turned toward a man named Marcus. Marcus was a quiet black man in his early 40s who had recently moved into an aging property at the edge of the community. Unlike the expensive vehicles parked in neighboring driveways, he drove an older pickup truck. He spent most of his days working around the house himself, repairing fences, trimming trees, and restoring parts of the property that had been neglected for years. To some residents, he seemed hardworking and respectful, but to others, especially a woman named Linda, he looked like someone who didn't belong. Linda was one of the most influential people in the neighborhood. She organized community events, sat on local committees, and often acted as though she had a say in everything that happened on the block. The moment she saw Marcus, she made assumptions about him. Assumptions based on his appearance, his race, and the fact that he didn't fit the image she believed the neighborhood should have. At first, her actions seemed small. A few judgmental looks, a few complaints to neighbors, a few rumors quietly spreading from one doorstep to another. But as weeks turned into months, those small actions began to grow into something much uglier. And while Marcus appeared to ignore the hostility surrounding him, there was one thing nobody in the neighborhood knew. Behind his calm silence was a secret that would soon turn every assumption upside down and expose just how dangerous prejudice can be when people mistake kindness for weakness. What began as whispered rumors soon became impossible to ignore. Linda seemed determined to make Marcus feel unwelcome. Whenever neighbors gathered, she found subtle ways to turn conversations toward him. She questioned how he could afford the property. She suggested that something about him seemed suspicious. Over time, those comments spread through the community like a slow-moving storm. People who had never spoken to Marcus suddenly viewed him with distrust. The tension grew worse when Marcus started making improvements to the neglected property. Fresh paint appeared on the house. Broken fences were replaced. Overgrown areas were cleared away. Instead of appreciating the changes, Linda treated every improvement as a threat. Complaints began pouring into local offices. Reports were filed questioning permits, property boundaries, and construction work. Inspectors arrived repeatedly. Each visit disrupted Marcus's progress. Yet every inspection ended the same way. No violations, no problems, no reason for concern. Still, the complaints continued. Neighbors started watching him. Some recorded him from their windows. Others crossed the street when he walked by. Parents quietly pulled their children away whenever he was nearby. Marcus never reacted. He kept working. He kept smiling politely. And somehow, his silence only seemed to frustrate Linda even more. Months passed. The neighborhood's hostility reached a point where almost everyone had chosen a side. Then came the community association meeting. For weeks, Linda had been gathering support. She convinced residents that Marcus was lowering property values and damaging the neighborhood's reputation. By the night of the meeting, she was confident she had enough influence to force action against him. The room was packed. Residents filled every seat, eager to see what would happen. Marcus sat quietly near the back. Linda stood before the crowd with the confidence of someone who believed she controlled the outcome. She presented complaint after complaint, accusation after accusation. Though there was little evidence behind her claims, years of influence had given her words weight. Many people nodded along. Others remained silent. Few were willing to challenge her. As the meeting continued, the atmosphere became increasingly uncomfortable. What started as complaints about property maintenance slowly revealed something deeper, something uglier. The assumptions, the stereotypes, the unspoken belief that Marcus simply didn't belong there. For the first time, some residents began noticing how unfairly he had been treated. But Linda wasn't finished. Determined to remove him from the neighborhood once and for all, she pushed for a formal review of his ownership status. She wanted proof that he had a right to be there. The request was approved. The room grew quiet. Marcus remained calm, almost too calm. There was no anger in his expression, no fear, no attempt to defend himself, just patience. And that patience confused everyone. Because while the neighborhood believed they were putting Marcus under scrutiny, Marcus seemed to know something they didn't, something important, something that made every accusation, every complaint, and every act of humiliation seem insignificant. As documents began arriving and officials prepared to review the property's ownership records, Linda sat back with a satisfied smile. She thought victory was finally within reach. What she didn't realize was that the truth hidden inside those records was about to change everything and expose the biggest mistake she had made since the day Marcus arrived. The day the ownership records were presented, the atmosphere inside the community hall felt different. The confidence that had filled the room during previous meetings had been replaced by anticipation. Residents packed the seats once again, eager to watch what many believed would be the final chapter of Marcus's time in the neighborhood. Linda sat near the front, certain she had won, certain that the documents would prove everything she had been saying for months. Then the records were opened. A hush swept across the room. People leaned forward, eyes widened, faces slowly drained of color. The property Marcus lived on wasn't simply his home. It was one of dozens of properties connected to a private development company. And according to the documents, Marcus wasn't a tenant. He wasn't renting. He wasn't struggling to stay there. He was the company's founder, the sole owner, the man who had quietly purchased large portions of the neighborhood years earlier through legal investments and development agreements. The room fell completely silent. Every accusation suddenly sounded ridiculous. Every complaint seemed cruel. Every assumption was exposed. For months, people had judged Marcus because of the color of his skin, the truck he drove, and the work clothes he wore. They had mistaken humility for poverty and dignity for weakness. No one felt that reality more heavily than Linda. The woman who had spent months trying to force him out had unknowingly been targeting one of the most influential property owners in the entire area. Shock spread across every corner of the room. Some residents lowered their heads. Others stared at Marcus, unable to process what they had just learned. Yet what happened next was even more powerful. Marcus showed no anger, no celebration, no desire for revenge. He simply sat there calmly, allowing the truth to speak for itself. And in that silence, the weight of everything the neighborhood had done finally crashed down on those responsible. Because the greatest humiliation wasn't discovering who Marcus was. It was realizing how they had treated him before they knew. And for Linda, the consequences of that realization were only beginning. The weeks that followed changed the neighborhood forever. News of the meeting spread quickly. Residents who had once avoided Marcus now found themselves confronting an uncomfortable truth. The problem had never been who Marcus was. The problem was how easily people had judged him without knowing anything about him. For Linda, the fallout was impossible to escape. The influence she had spent years building began to disappear. Neighbors who had followed her lead started questioning their own actions. Some felt embarrassed. Others felt guilty. Many realized they had allowed assumptions and prejudice to shape their opinions instead of facts. But Marcus never used his position to seek revenge. Instead, he continued restoring the neighborhood, investing in community projects, and treating people with the same respect he had shown from the beginning. His actions became a powerful reminder that character is not measured by appearance, wealth, race, or social status. Over time, the neighborhood improved, not because of the expensive homes or perfectly trimmed lawns, but because people were finally forced to examine the biases they carried inside themselves. Yet the story leaves behind a difficult question. Would Marcus have been treated with kindness if everyone had known he was wealthy from the start? Or did respect only arrive when people discovered his power and influence? That question reaches far beyond one neighborhood. Every day, people are judged because of the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the assumptions others make about them. Too often, society decides someone's worth before learning their story. Marcus's experience reminds us that prejudice doesn't begin with hatred. Sometimes it begins with a simple assumption that goes unchallenged. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Before judging someone, ask yourself, if their title, wealth, or status were hidden, would you still treat them the same way? Because true character isn't revealed by how we treat powerful people. It's revealed by how we treat those we believe have none.